yourself?
Okay, I'm Dr. Obadele Kambon, Research Fellow here in the Institute of African Studies in the Language, Literature, and Drama section here at the University of Ghana, Legon. Did my PhD here, completed in 2012, won the Vice Chancellor's Award for Best PhD Thesis in that year that I came out, and I've been here pretty much ever since.
So, would you mind telling us about some of your views on Pan-Afrikanism?
So first off, we have to have some level of understanding of Africa. And to do that, we can look at various African languages. So when we look at African languages, you find that Africa and land of black people tend to be coterminous. So for example, the word Africa and tree would be Abibi mine. The root of that is Bibi, translating to black, and then mine, land or nation. If you look at Yoruba, Ile Adulawo, that's to say land of black people. Again, if you look at ancient Egypt, it was actually called Kemet. And the word Kemet, when used with a determinative of land or town, again meant land of black people. And that was also the term that they used for themselves, represented with a man and a woman and then a plural marker. And that was their word for themselves, which was to say black people. If you look at the Kikongo language in Sia Bandombe, again, land of black people. If you look at Wolof, Reo, Nikunyur. If you look at other languages just throughout the continent, Farafina, again, land of black people. So when we're thinking about Pan-Africanism, we can think about it in terms of black people, wherever we are. Again, black people and African being coterminous, basically, and saying that wherever we are, combining in areas, especially in terms of politically, economically, spiritually, socially, and things of that nature. I'm actually working on a book entitled The Ancient African Origins of Pan-Africanism, looking at various cases where we did just that. We all came together under one umbrella, various types of black people / African.
Can you provide some examples of those cases?
Yeah, that's what I'm actually about to do.
Okay.
So any of the ancient empires that we're talking about, these are not homogeneous people. These are various types of black people that are coming together under one umbrella. So Kemet as an example, what we know as Nubia as an example, Songhai, going back to Mali, going back to ancient Ghana, which was initially called Ouagadougou, Mali originally called Nani, looking at the Wolof states. All of these confederations are exactly that, various types of black people being brought together under one umbrella. You can see the same thing amongst the Amazulu in the Congo Kingdom, and so forth and so on. So anytime you're talking about empire, and empire is basically saying, here's one kingdom, here's one kingdom, here's one kingdom, here's one kingdom. The empire is bringing all of these kingdoms under one umbrella. So if we are looking at Pan-Africanism, we can look no further than some of those examples. And this is actually something that Aikweyama talks about in his book, Remembering the Dismembered Continent. He did a talk, and also he and I corresponded. And I gave him this manuscript that I'm working on. He was like, this is a general thing. The major difference is that I'm focusing more so on Kemet because these other empires did not necessarily have the basis as we're all black people and that's why we're going to come together. Whereas in Kemet, when we're talking about Kemet itself, you're talking about black people. The name itself means black people, and then you have land of black people. You can actually look at this in terms of the original policy that was basically ignoring Southwestern Asia, which was right across the Sinai Peninsula, and always interested in incorporating other black people in, going further south, incorporating those.
Could you talk about a little bit of Egypt before it became Anglo-Egypt, and talk about the fact that it was an all-black Kemet, and I think a lot of people aren't aware of that.
Right. Yeah. So as mentioned, I'm not sure if you'll be able to incorporate graphics or things into this, but look up Narmer, the founding father, the uniter of Kemet itself. And you'll look at him and you'll say he looks like a young Mike Tyson, right? if you look at the images of Amenhotep III, if you look at images of Ramesses II, Ramesses III, Tutankhamun, so forth and so on, you'll see very clearly who they are. And, as Eurasians were starting to, what I would say, whitewash the history, Dr. Jacob Carruthers talks about this in Intellectual Warfare, that you have, them not being fully clear as to whether they should say that this was not a black civilization, or to, yes, acknowledge it was a black civilization, but they didn't do that much. So, in the late 1700s, the early 1800s, you have this, all right, what are we going to do about this problem that, we now have? So one of the main things that you can look at is, the terminology, so Kemet itself. And then I was also looking at a PhD thesis. It was done in the 70s, and the author is escaping me, but he was also looking at this term Iao, and looking at two basic translations of this. One was interpreter, like someone who does translations, interpreter, and the other one was Nubians, these Nubian soldiers who came in and came eventually to be coterminous when you have like the Medjai, coterminous with the internal policing force of the ruler there. So when you look at this term, he's going in specifically into the Old Kingdom, that you're always talking about bringing in other black people, and then he even gives a map and shows all these different places. So this is one of the key things. And then you look at texts like the inscriptions of Winnie, where he talks about how they brought together all of these various African people, the Wawat Nubians, the Irjet Nubians, the Sejer Nubians, the Medjay Nubians, so forth and so on. And they were all coming together in order to fight off these Asiatics, quote unquote. This is your everyday Eurasian that we're talking about these days, Arabs, so forth and so on. And it's very powerful because, it gives you an understanding of Pan-Africanism. We're combining all of us together, but not just for no reason, but in order to fight against a common common threat, common enemy.
So now
And really quick, let me round up on this. When you think about African concepts of the human being, of the person, the human being tends to be understood as not just mind and body split, but an understanding of various aspects that are coming together for a specific purpose. So it's, for example, to use an iconic case, you have the Okra. They usually translate that as soul. Sum, they usually translate that as spirit. You have the Re, which is like the spirit associated with the heart. You have the Hum, which is the breath. You have the Hunam, which is the body. All of these parts are coming together, but then you ask, well, why are they coming together? Well, the main force that unites them is what we will call the Nkrabia, the destiny, the mission, the purpose for a person being here on the planet. So we can, now take that concept of, and again, sometimes you'll have people who are feeling like, oh, I don't want to live anymore, they're suicidal. They say, I don't feel like I have a reason to live, why am I here, right? And really what they're saying is, I'm not in alignment with my destiny, I'm not in alignment with my purpose. So the only reason for all of these different parts to be together is to fulfill that. So if there's no reason, well, now let the body go back to the earth, let the crowd go back to the Supreme Being, let the spirit go back to the Father, and so forth and so on. So now let's bring that back here to what we're talking about, Kemet. So when you had all these various African people coming together in a very, very Pan-African force, this is exactly what we're talking about. We have a purpose to be together. When we lose sight of what this common purpose is, whether it's defense, whether it's offense, or whatever the case may be, that's where we just fragment out into, all right, well, why I might as well just fight you. But then it's as foolish as saying, all right, well, here's my hand, here's my jaw. Well, if we don't have a common purpose together, well, now let's just fight amongst each other. If you saw somebody do that, you would say they're crazy. But this is the state that we are in as Africans, where you have this ethnic group fighting against this ethnic group, most people fighting against those people because they don't understand we have a common enemy. So now my hand and my eye need to be, united in order to fight against this enemy.
So what do you think the collective destiny is of African people, and then also the diaspora as well? Because I think that right now there is a disconnect with the diaspora. They don't actually realize that they are part of this larger equation. They're kind of isolated from it.
Yeah, when we're talking about black people, we're talking about throughout space and time. There's a proverb in Wolof, which is to say no matter how long a log stays in the water, it never becomes a crocodile. And Malcolm X gave a similar analogy where he says if a cat has kittens in an oven, that doesn't make them biscuits. That when you think about these disconnections, not only from continent to diaspora, but within the continent as well, you have to think about how those serve the purposes of Eurasians in general, wherein their main focus is, one, they want to survive, and then two, they don't want justice to be done. Now, when we think about justice, you can think about 100 million Africans, died through, at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Besides, we even start talking about those who didn't even reach it to the ocean before we start talking about those in the so-called seasoning plantations in the Caribbean, before we talk about the lynchings, the murders, the rape, so forth and so on. So in general, one thing that I find unites Eurasians is that they don't want justice to be done. So if they ever come and give you an ideology, whether they call it feminism or socialism or capitalism or whatever, one thing that they have in common is that there's no part of it that talks about justice, right? When you look at their defense budget, the U.S. alone, 500 billion plus, more than the next 14 put together, right? And all of those 14 are all Eurasian-run countries, either in Eurasia proper or Australia and Brazil were the ones that were outside. So when there's a proverb in Chi, which is to say one who cuts throats is scared to lay on his back, right? And again, you think that there's reciprocity in the world. So when you see the U.S. defense budget, that means that they believe in you as African people, right? They believe that you would possibly be able to bring justice to them. If they didn't, they would say, well, we don't need a defense budget. We're just superior and let's just lay back. There's nothing to do. But because they believe in you more than you believe in yourself. So I think that what would unite us is the restoration and reestablishment of what's called Ma'at. And Ma'at is the very first concept of law, divine law on the face of the planet. And the core principles of it: truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, order, reciprocity. Now, when we're talking about one thing, it's the same as talking about the other thing. So if we're talking about order, you're talking about justice. So until there's justice on the planet, there won't be order on the planet. We can see this very clearly in terms of everything from the environment to social interactions and so forth and so on. So I think that that's really what would unite us together as a common destiny in seeing a great injustice has been done. So justice needs to be done, and we would need to come together to do that. When I think about places like the U.S. in general, it's Pan-Europeanism to the fullest extent. In terms of language, you have German in there, you have Latin in there, from French, Spanish, everything is in there. And it's really Pan-Eurasian in terms of those who run the thing. And then you have everybody else down here at the bottom. So, again, that's what I think would unite us, is the restoration of Ma'at, the bringing of justice to the planet.
So how do you think that you're going to cultivate that awareness within the populations of the diaspora who've been so disconnected? You're saying these things like, this sounds all well and good, but they feel detached. So how do we cultivate that connection now that we have the technology, we have the means, we have the language to actually interact and communicate, to make what you're saying a reality? How do we go about that and cultivating it?
Okay, so your question is actually in alignment with what my topic will be next week, and I actually want to read something. So for each one of the classes that I've done videos and put them online. So I've gotten quite a lot of feedback from Africans in the diaspora who've said, I've been following this and I, really feel like it's helping me connect. So one sister in particular, she said that she shared it with her younger sister who's really not interested in Africa. Her sister looked at it and started crying. Well, let me actually just read it for you, and you can just edit as I'm trying to find this.
Killing it, though.
Oh, thanks.
Killing it. Really good.
Hopefully I will help to resurrect it.
Hopefully.
Yeah, this sister said, I seriously watch the clock on Thursdays. They're out of their class now. How long before the video is uploaded? Well, I want to share, because, especially about her sister, because of where, you're coming from in terms of people who are feeling disconnected. and what we can do in terms of the technology to help them to understand their connection. Okay. Sister says she's ready to get serious about being African. I forwarded all the links to the foundations class. She's so overwhelmed in a good way, that's in parentheses, that she called me in tears yesterday. We didn't grow up together, so the things that people like you and I grew up knowing as very basic are blowing her mind now. I actually have no idea what initiated her inquiry to me last week. She called me and said she wanted to know about Black history. Oh, and a few weeks ago she asked me about the name Horus because her brother had a baby on the way and wanted to name him that. I told her that Horus was a Greek name. Then we went into the whole thing a bit, about the origin of Heru, the terminology. So after the call last week, I sent her the YouTube links and said that the information presented here would clear her lens to learn about Black history. Otherwise, Black history would be seemingly meaningless names, dates, places, and occurrences. So seriously, thanks so much for putting this out there. I'm eager to see what becomes of it for my sister. Yesterday, she was asking me about Ma'at. Whoa! That's what she wrote. I told her to hang on tight, but it's about to get trill out here for her. Her family is deep into white Jesu worship, and then eyes rolling thing. But just that as a case study, another sister sent me another email talking a very long. She started off saying, "Let me apologize for the length of this email, but I've been following along with this series of classes, and I think it's powerful. I want to interact with you. I have a friend who's going to be coming to Ghana. I want you to link up." So by using this technology that we invented, is really allowing us to reach out to other African people so that they can see what's going on the continent, so that information dissemination can be out there and all those things. Yeah,
Definitely. All right, I think that would be solid. I don't want to take too much of your time up.